The galaxy feared the warp. Humans colonized it and called it the Immaterium. If you are not a heretic, then declare your city of origin. Leave a comment, a like, and subscribe to the Emperor's glory. At the conclusion, rate this tale from 0 to 10. The Emperor protects. The Veltar fleet hung motionless in the void, their elegant crystalline ships reflecting the distant light of a dying star. Captain Zalthek, his feline features tense with worry, studied the tactical display with growing dread. 37 vessels, all that remained of the once mighty Veltar Expeditionary Force. Sir, Communications Officer Yilra's whiskers twitched nervously. The Drakmor swarm has entered sensor range. Preliminary count shows over 2,000 bioships. Zalthek's ears flattened against his skull. The Drakmor, reptilian slavers who had been systematically conquering systems along the eastern spiral. Their cold-blooded efficiency had shattered 3 separate galactic civilizations in the past century. Now they had come for the Veltar homeworlds. "Any word from the Tau?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Negative, sir." Firecast Commander Chassel Mien transmitted their regrets. Quote, "The greater good requires strategic withdrawal in the face of overwhelming odds. We shall remember your sacrifice." End quote. A bitter laugh escaped Zalthek's throat. Even their supposed allies had abandoned them. The proud Tau Empire, with all their advanced technology and philosophy, had calculated the odds and deemed the Veltar expendable. What about the Eldar Corsairs? They vanished 3 hours ago. No farewell transmission. Typical. The ancient Aeldari had their own mysterious agenda, and it clearly didn't involve dying alongside primitive species. Zalthek couldn't entirely blame them. The Veltar were a young race by galactic standards, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 2 centuries ago. "Sir," scanner. Technician Pilwan's tail bristled with excitement. "New contacts dropping out of warp, unknown configuration." Zalthek spun toward the main display. 3 massive vessels had materialized at the system's edge, crude Gothic monstrosities covered in cathedral spires and weapon batteries. They looked less like starships and more like flying cities built by madmen. "Configuration unknown, but energy signatures are massive," Pilwan reported. "Those ships are each larger than our entire battle group combined. Are they Drakmor reinforcements?" "Negative, sir. Completely different design philosophy. These are crude, inefficient, but the power output readings are off the charts." A new voice crackled through the comm system, harsh, gravelly, speaking in a language none of them recognized. Then the universal translator kicked in, rendering the alien words into Veltar standard. "Unknown Xeno vessels. This is Brother Captain Maximus of the Ultramarines 3rd Company. We have received your distress beacon. Identify yourselves and your enemies." Zalthek exchanged glances with his bridge crew. None of them had heard of these Ultramarines before, but the speaker's tone carried absolute authority and something else, a casual confidence that bordered on arrogance. "This is Captain Zalthek of the Veltar Defense Fleet," he replied carefully. "We face invasion by the Drakmor hegemony. With respect, strangers, you should flee while you can. Their numbers are overwhelming." A pause, then something that might have been laughter. "Overwhelming numbers, you say? How refreshing. It has been too long since we faced a proper challenge. 3rd Company, prepare for planetary assault. The Emperor protects." "Wait," Zalthek's claws extended involuntarily. "You don't understand. There are thousands of them. Your 3 ships against their entire invasion fleet. It's suicide." "Brother Captain," came another voice, calmer but no less. Confident. "Preliminary scans indicate the Xenoforce consists primarily of bioships. Tyranid variants, perhaps? Or a new strain? Unknown, Brother Cassius. We shall learn soon enough. All vessels, advance to attack formation. Today we bring the Emperor's light to this dark corner of the galaxy." Zalthek watched in fascination and horror as the 3 human ships accelerated toward the Drakmor fleet. They moved with surprising speed for their size, but the math was simple and brutal. The Veltar had calculated that even their 37 vessels stood virtually no chance against the swarm. 3 ships, no matter how well armed, would be obliterated in minutes. "Sir," Yilra whispered, "are we just going to watch them die?" Something stirred in Zalthek's chest, a mixture of admiration and shame. These unknown humans had responded to a distress call from complete strangers, flying directly into certain death without hesitation. Meanwhile, Their supposed allies had fled or abandoned them entirely. "All ships," he announced over the fleet-wide channel, "advanced to support our unexpected allies. If they're determined to die with honor, the least we can do is die beside them." The Veltar fleet surged forward, their graceful vessels struggling to keep pace with the human ships. As they closed the distance, Zalthek got his first clear look at their new allies through the long-range scopes. The human vessels were nightmares of Baroque architecture and weaponry. Every surface bristled with gun batteries, torpedo tubes, and strange energy projectors. Gothic cathedrals rose from their hulls like mountains, and enormous eagles, or were they two-headed birds, decorated their prows. They looked like something from a fever dream, powerful but insane. "Fascinating," murmured Science Officer Telsan. "Their technology appears to blend advanced metallurgy with, are those prayer wheels? And incense burners?" Indeed, strange vapor trails leaked from various ports along the ship's hulls, and Zalthek could swear he heard something that sounded like chanting over the comm channels. The Drakmor fleet had noticed the approaching vessels and was already adjusting formation. Their bioships writhed through space like living serpents, all chitin and membrane and razor-sharp bone protrusions. At their center loomed the command vessel, a massive creature that might once have been a space whale but had been surgically modified into something obscene and predatory. "Brother Captain," the calmer human voice reported, "I'm reading significant xeno-presence aboard the enemy vessels. Reptilian life signs, consistent with the Drakmor species profile in our databases. Recommend purging protocols." "Agreed, Brother Cassius. All batteries prepare to fire. Machine spirits, hear our prayers and guide our aim. In the Emperor's name, purge the Xeno." The first salvo from the human ships was a revelation. Dozens of lance beams lashed out across the void, followed by torpedoes the size of buildings and exotic energy bursts that seemed to tear reality itself. The Drakmor vanguard simply ceased to exist. Entire bioships were reduced to atomic vapor in seconds. "By the ancestors," breathed Pilwan. "What manner of weapons are those?" But the Drakmor were far from finished. The swarm adapted with frightening speed, their remaining ships spreading out and accelerating to ramming speed. Acid, projectiles and bioplasma bursts filled the space between fleets. The human ships plowed through the barrage as if it were rain. Their shields, or whatever protected them, absorbed punishment that should have crippled any vessel, while their return fire never ceased. They chanted constantly over the comms, prayers and battle hymns in their harsh language. "These humans," Telsan observed, "they fight as if defeat is literally impossible." Zalthek was beginning to understand why. As the battle raged, he caught glimpses of the human crew through the comlinks. They were enormous, each one easily twice the height and mass of a Veltar warrior, encased in powered armor that made them look more like walking tanks than living beings. But it was their faces that truly shocked him. They showed no fear, no hesitation, no doubt whatsoever. They fired their weapons with the same casual efficiency they might use to breathe, and when Drakmor boarders managed to breach their hulls, the humans met them with chainswords and bolt pistols, laughing. One particular human, Brother Cassius apparently, was clearly visible through a hull breach, standing in hard vacuum without a helmet, cutting down Drakmor infiltrators with a glowing power sword while reciting what sounded like religious poetry. "They're fighting in vacuum," Yilra whispered, "without environment suits. How are they still alive?" The answer came from Brother Captain Maximus himself, his voice carrying easily across the comm despite the chaos around them. "The Emperor protects. Xeno allies. Fear not death when duty calls. For every enemy that falls, the Imperium grows stronger." As if to punctuate his words, the lead human ship, the one designated as Battle Barge Righteous Fury, rammed directly through the Drakmor command creature, its cathedral-sized ram prow punching through chitin and bone like they were paper. The massive bioship convulsed and died, taking several thousand Drakmor with it. The human ship emerged from the other side, hull-scarred but intact, already engaging the next wave of enemies. Zalthek realized he was holding his breath. In all his years of naval service, he had never witnessed anything like this. The humans fought as if the very laws of physics were merely suggestions, as if defeat was a concept their species had never learned. But the most disturbing part was their absolute certainty. They spoke of their emperor with the same tone others might use for gravity or mathematics, not as belief but as fact. Their prayers weren't requests, but statements of inevitable reality. "Sir," Pilwan's voice was barely a whisper, "the Drakmor fleet is withdrawing." It was true. The reptilian swarm, which had seemed so terrifyingly unstoppable just hours before, was falling back in disorder. Their bioadaptive strategies, so effective against conventional forces, seemed utterly useless against opponents who simply refused to acknowledge the possibility of defeat. The human ships pursued relentlessly, their guns never silent, their chanting growing louder, and somehow, impossibly, the tide of battle had turned. The first thing Captain Thiel noticed about the human ship was the smell. Even through the atmospheric processes, something acrid and metallic permeated the docking bay of the strike cruiser Emperor's Wrath. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, but it was wrong, like heated metal, and burned incense mixed with something organic. "Captain, the delegation is ready to board," announced Lieutenant Crix, his lupine ears flattening slightly. The canine officer's pack instincts were clearly uncomfortable with the unknown. Thiel's own feline reflexes were on edge as well. His whiskers twitched, picking up vibrations from the massive human vessel. The ship was easily 3 times the size of their fastest destroyer, its Gothic architecture bristling with weapon batteries. That defied all tactical logic. Who built guns that big? Who needed that much firepower? The airlock hissed open with a mechanical wheeze that sounded almost organic. What emerged made Thiel's tail bristle involuntarily. The first human was enormous, standing nearly 3 meters tall in midnight blue armor that hummed with barely contained energy. A skull emblem adorned the breastplate, and red eye lenses glowed in the warrior's helmet. Behind him came 2 more figures in similar armor, moving with predatory grace that reminded Thiel uncomfortably of his own hunting ancestors. "I am Brother Sergeant Cassius of the Ultramarines," the lead figure announced, his voice a bass rumble that seemed to emanate from the armor itself. "We come in the name of the God Emperor of mankind." The casual mention of divinity made several of Thiel's officers exchange glances. Most civilized species had moved beyond primitive deity worship millennia ago. "Welcome aboard the Stella." "Wind," Thiel replied, performing the traditional bow of his people. "I am Captain Thiel of the Feline Confederacy. We appreciate your response to our distress call." The humans didn't bow. They stood rigid, unmoving, as if carved from stone. It was deeply unsettling. "Your message spoke of Tyrannid incursion," Cassius stated. Not asked, stated. "Show us." Thiel led them to the tactical center, acutely aware of the heavy footfalls behind him. Each step of the armored giants seemed to shake the deck plating. His crew, a mix of feline, canine, and avian officers, pressed against the walls as they passed. The humans paid them no attention whatsoever. "The swarm hit our colony world of Felinus Prime 6 standard days ago," Thiel began, activating the holographic display. "We estimate 15 million organisms in the first wave alone." The projection showed a garden world being systematically devoured. Cities disappeared under writhing masses of chitin and teeth. Evacuation ships fled, burning through atmosphere thick with flying monstrosities. "Biomass consumption rate is exceeding all projections," added Commander Whiskers, the avian tactical officer. "At current pace, the planet will be stripped bare within 72 hours. Cassius studied the display with inhuman stillness. "Hive Fleet Jormungandr. We have fought this tendril before." "Fought?" Lieutenant Crix's ears perked up. "And survived?" The human's helmet turned toward him with mechanical precision. "We did not merely survive Xenos, we broke them upon the anvil of Macraga. The Emperor protects." The last phrase was spoken with religious fervor that made Thiel's fur stand on end. These beings weren't just warriors, they were fanatics. "However," Cassius continued, "your world presents tactical complications. Tyrannids adapt quickly. They will have learned from previous encounters." "Then, what do you suggest?" Thiel asked. "We purge them." The second human spoke for the first time. His voice carried the same mechanical certainty, with fire and faith. Before anyone could respond, klaxons began wailing throughout the ship. The tactical display flashed red as new contacts appeared at the system's edge. "Captain," Chief Sensor Operator Talon, An eagle-featured avian turned from her console with talons clicking nervously. Massive gravitational distortions detected. Something's dropping out of warp. The main screen flickered to life, showing the void of space. For a moment, nothing was visible except stars. Then reality seemed to tear open. What emerged defied comprehension. Ships, if they could be called ships, that looked more like living organs than constructed vessels. Kilometers-long creatures of bone and flesh and chitin, their surfaces crawling with smaller organisms. Weapon ports gaped like hungry mouths. Bioluminescent patches pulsed with alien life. By the eternal hunt, Thiel whispered, invoking his people's most sacred oath. Contact count is Emperor's blood. Cassius's voice held the first hint of emotion Thiel had heard. Hive ship and 17 escort organisms. Estimated biomass, 800 million tyrannids. The numbers were incomprehensible. The entire feline confederacy navy numbered perhaps 50,000 beings. This single swarm could devour 100 worlds. Sir, Crix's voice cracked slightly. They're changing course, heading directly for us. Thiel felt his command instincts kick in despite the hopelessness. All ships, battle stations, prepare for evasive maneuvers. Negative, Cassius interrupted. Every alien on the bridge turned to stare at him. Negative? Thiel repeated. We do not run from Xenos filth, the Space Marine stated flatly. Signal the fleet. All vessels, attack formation Omega-7. Fleet? Commander Whiskers squawked. How many ships do you have? Currently in system. 3 strike cruisers and escort vessels. Approximately 12,000 Adeptus Astartes. 12,000. Against 800 million. That's suicide, Thiel breathed. Cassius finally turned to face him directly. Even through the helmet, Thiel could feel the weight of those red lenses studying him. Captain Thiel of the Feline Confederacy, the Space Marine said formally. You have 3 options. You may withdraw your vessels to a safe distance and observe. You may evacuate this system entirely. Or, the pause, stretched like a taut wire. Or, Thiel found himself asking, you may stand with us, fight beside the angels of death in the Emperor's name, prove that Xenos can show courage in the face of certain death. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of electronics and the distant vibration of the approaching swarm. Every eye was on Thiel. His crew, his people, trusted him to make the right choice. The logical choice was obvious. Retreat. Preserve what they could. Live to fight another day. Instead, Thiel found himself thinking of the colony worlds behind them. Billions of feline, canine, and avian civilians who couldn't run fast enough. Who would be consumed by the swarm, while more logical minds calculated acceptable losses? What exactly are you proposing? He heard himself ask. For the first time, Cassius did something that might have been a smile. We're going to do what humans do best, Captain Thiel. We're going to take an impossible situation and make it worse for the enemy. The Kythera ship shuddered as another wave of bioacid splashed against its hull. Through the observation deck, Commander Veltar watched in horrified fascination as the human Imperial Guardsmen below continued their impossible charge against the Devourer swarm. Status report, he barked into his comm, never taking his eyes off the battlefield. Hull integrity at 60%, Commander, came the strained voice of his engineer. The acid is eating through our secondary plating, but those human machines, they're still advancing. Veltar's ears flattened against his skull. The humans weren't machines. That was the terrifying part. They were flesh and blood, just like his people, but they fought with a mechanical precision that defied every instinct for self-preservation his species had evolved over millennia. Below, a guardsman had his left arm completely severed by a ripper's razor-sharp claws. Without pause, the human grabbed his lasgun in his remaining hand, screamed something about an emperor, and continued firing into the writhing mass of chitin and teeth. By the ancestors, whispered Veltar's tactical officer, a young female named Ciara. How are they still alive? The answer came in the form of a thunderous war cry that somehow carried over the sound of weapons fire and alien screeching. For the Emperor! The Emperor protects! Veltar had heard that phrase at least 50 times in the past hour. Every time one of the humans shouted it, something impossible happened. Wounds that should have been fatal were ignored. Weapons that should have malfunctioned kept firing. Positions that should have been overrun somehow held. "Commander," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human commander. Designation Commissar Thorne. Put it through." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a scarred human face beneath a peaked cap. The man's coat was torn and bloody, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made Veltar unconsciously step backward. "Xenos vessel," the commissar's voice crackled with static. "We require immediate artillery support on grid reference 77 Alpha. Danger close." Veltar's translator struggled with the term. "Danger close? I don't understand." "It means we're requesting you fire directly on our position," Commissar Thorne replied matter-of-factly, as if he'd asked for the time. The Kythera. Bridge fell silent. Even by their standards of military sacrifice, this was insanity. "But your soldiers will die," Veltar managed. The commissar's scarred face split into what might generously be called a smile. "Some will. The Emperor will judge their souls worthy. Those who survive will have proven their faith. Either way, we win." Before Veltar could respond, the transmission cut to show the battlefield from the human perspective. Through a helmet-mounted recorder, they watched a guardsman with both legs crushed beneath rubble continue to fire his weapon while humming what sounded like a religious hymn. "Target their central mass," came another voice over the comm, this one belonging to a different human unit. "Sisters of battle advancing to purge position." What Veltar saw next would haunt his dreams for years to come. A group of power-armored human females emerged from the smoke, wielding weapons that spat promethium flame. They moved through the devourer swarm like avenging spirits, singing as they burned everything in their path. "Holy fire cleanses the unclean," one of them shouted, her voice amplified by her armor's voxcaster. "Blessed be the Emperor's wrath." The bioforms, creatures that had torn through Kythera defensive lines like paper, actually seemed to recoil from the advancing sisters. Not from their weapons, Veltar realized with growing horror, but from their absolute faith. "Ciara," he said quietly, "run a comparative analysis on human vital signs versus expected survival parameters." His tactical officer's claws clicked rapidly over her console. After several minutes, she looked up with wide, frightened eyes. "Commander, according to our medical databases, approximately 40% of the humans currently fighting should be clinically dead." "Explain." "Blood loss, organ damage, neural trauma. They're operating with injuries that would incapacitate any known species. Yet their combat effectiveness appears unchanged." As if summoned by their conversation, a new voice joined the human communication network, deeper, more resonant than the others. When the figure stepped into view of their sensors, Veltar's entire bridge crew fell silent. The Space Marine was over 2 meters tall, encased in ceramite armor that had been painted deep blue with golden trim. Even through the static of their long-range sensors, the transhuman's presence was overwhelming. "I am Sergeant Brutus of the Ultramarines 3rd Company," the giant announced. "Imperial Guard units consolidate on my position. We advance in 10 minutes. Commissar Thorne's voice crackled back. "Sergeant, our casualties are approaching 70%. Standard doctrine suggests tactical withdrawal." The Space Marine's response carried across every human communication channel, and somehow Veltar's translator rendered it with perfect clarity. There is no retreat. There is no surrender. There is only duty to the Emperor. We hold this line until every Xenos is purged, or until we join the Emperor's side. "Understood, my lord," came the immediate response from every human unit simultaneously. Veltar watched in fascination as the broken, bleeding human forces somehow organized themselves around the lone Space Marine. Guardsmen with makeshift bandages and jury-rigged weapons took positions that any sane military doctrine would have declared untenable. "Commander," his communications officer reported, "the humans are requesting technical specifications on our weapon systems." "For what purpose?" "They want to improvise modifications." Before Veltar could ask what that meant, his engineer's panicked voice filled the bridge. "Commander, the humans have boarded our ship." "Hostile boarding action?" "No, sir. They're in Engineering Base 7 and they're praying to our plasma generators." The view screen switched to an internal security feed, showing several figures in red robes standing before the Kythera's primary power systems. They were chanting in a language that made Veltar's fur stand on end, waving incense burners and making incomprehensible gestures over the machinery. "By the Omnissiah's grace, let this machine spirit serve the Emperor's will," one of the red-robed figures intoned. "Sacred oils and blessed unguents, sanctify this technology in his name." The impossible happened. The Kythera power systems, which had been operating at barely 60% efficiency due to battle damage, suddenly surged to full capacity and beyond. "Engineering reports all systems green," his officer stammered. "Better than green. We're operating at 120% efficiency. That should be physically impossible." One of the red-robed figures, an Adeptus Mechanicus tech priest, Veltar realized, approached the security camera. Half his face was mechanical, and his organic eye glowed with religious fervor. "The machine god smiles upon your vessel, Xenos. Your technology serves the Omnissiah now, and through him, the god emperor of mankind. Blessed be his name." The tech priest's mechanical hand made a gesture that somehow caused the ship's entire weapon array to recalibrate itself. Targeting solutions that had been eluding Veltar's crew for hours suddenly appeared with perfect clarity. "All batteries, target the Xenos bioship," came Sergeant Brutus's voice over the com for the Emperor. What followed was the most devastating artillery barrage Veltar had ever witnessed. The Kythera weapons, enhanced by impossible human faith technology, carved through the Devourer bioconstruct like it was tissue paper. The massive organism that had been spawning endless swarms simply ceased. But the human reaction to their victory was what truly terrified Veltar. They didn't celebrate. They didn't rest. They immediately began preparing for the next engagement. "Casualty report," Commissar Thorne requested. 87% casualties, sir," came the response. "Remaining forces ready for continued operations." "Excellent. Sisters of Battle, establish a perimeter. Ultramarines, advance and secure the area. Any heretical taint will be purged with fire." Veltar's communications officer suddenly straightened. "Commander, we're receiving a wide-spectrum transmission. Origin unknown." The main screen flickered, then filled with an image that made every Kythera on the bridge instinctively bare their teeth. Reptilian features, cold and calculating, with technology that seemed to bend light around itself. "Mammals," the figure hissed, its voice carrying undertones that suggested vast intelligence and contempt. "You have interfered with our harvest for the last time. The hegemony does not tolerate disruption." The reptilian's image was joined by others, a fleet of ships that seemed to phase in and out of reality, their hulls covered in what looked like living scales. "This system belongs to us now. Surrender, and your deaths will be efficient." The transmission cut to show the human forces on the ground. Veltar expected panic, or at least tactical discussion of the overwhelming odds they now faced. Instead, Commissar Thorne simply looked up at the sky and smiled. "Sergeant Brutus," he called out, "it appears the Emperor has provided us with more heretics to purge." The Space Marines. Laughter echoed across the battlefield, a sound that somehow conveyed both joy and promise of violence. "Indeed, Commissar. It seems our work is not yet finished." As the reptilian fleet descended toward the planet, Veltar realized with growing dread that the humans weren't preparing to retreat or hide. They were reloading their weapons and singing hymns. The human commander stepped forward, his Cadian uniform torn and bloodied, plasma rifle humming with barely contained energy. Behind him, the surviving guardsmen formed a ragged line. 37 men and women from an original force of 500. Any sane military doctrine would call for immediate retreat. "Colonel Voss," Captain Taushazel Kauyon transmitted through his battlesuit speakers, his voice carrying the weight of tactical analysis, "my calculations indicate a 0.003% probability of success. The Tyranids swarm ahead, numbers in the tens of thousands. Tactical withdrawal is the only logical." "Belay that, Xenos," Commissar Yekaterina Volga interrupted, her bolt pistol already drawn. "We hold here." The Felician pack leader, Fenrax, his silver fur matted with alien ichor, padded closer to the human line. His species had fought alongside the Tau for decades, but these humans were different. "Colonel Voss, honored ally, my scouts report the hive ship's landing spores descending. In minutes, this position will be overrun. Your pack is brave, but we're not retreating," Colonel Voss stated flatly, checking his Chainsword's fuel cell. This is where we make our stand. The Eldar Farseer Aletok sworn Lirelai materialized from the webway portal, her runes casting ghostly light across the battlefield. For over 3 millennia, she had observed the rise and fall of civilizations. Mon Ki, your species' capacity for self-destruction continues to astound me. This position cannot be held. Even your primitive understanding of tactics must— Ma'am, Sergeant Martinez interrupted, hefting his melter-gun. With respect, we've held worse positions with less. The ground beneath them trembled as countless chitinous forms swarmed across the horizon. Gargoyles blotted out the twin suns. Hormgaunts flowed like a living tide of death. At their center, a hive tyrant, its biocannons already focusing on the small group of defenders. Captain Kaoyon's battlesuit sensors ran continuous probability calculations. Colonel, my battlesuits. Tactical cogitator suggests immediate evacuation to— Negative, Captain, Voss replied, pulling a worn prayer scroll from his flak vest. Mordians hold the line. It's what we do. The Tau commander fell silent, his alien mind struggling to process the human's absolute certainty in the face of mathematical impossibility. His species had joined the galactic community, believing in the greater good, in rational calculation and measured progress. These humans operated on principles that defied all logical analysis. Private Kowalski, barely 18 Terran years old, was methodically loading his last clip of lasgun cells. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the stims coursing through his system. Emperor protects, he whispered, a prayer learned in the scholar on Mordian Prime. Does he? Fenrax asked, genuine curiosity in his lupine features. Your Emperor, does he truly watch over your pack? Kowalski looked up, his young face already bearing the 1,000-yard stare of a veteran. Don't know, alien, but we still fight like he does. The first wave of Hormgaunts crested the ridge, their scything claws glinting in the dying light. A living wall of death, evolution's perfect killing machines, bred for one purpose: consumption. First rank! Fire! The command echoed across the human line. 37 lasguns spoke as one, crimson beams lancing into the approaching swarm. Where each beam struck, chitin exploded into fragments, but for every gaunt that fell, 10 more took its place. Second rank, fire! The disciplined volleys continued, each shot placed with mechanical precision. The humans fought not with the desperate fury of cornered animals, but with the cold efficiency of a practiced execution. This wasn't desperation, this was doctrine. Captain Kaoyon's battlesuit weapons added their firepower to the defense, his burst cannon chewing through the alien swarm, but his tactical subroutines continued their relentless analysis. Colonel Voss, at current rate of ammunition expenditure, your forces will exhaust supplies in 4 minutes, 37 seconds. Then we fix bayonets, Commissar Volga replied, matter-of-factly. The Tau commander's translator struggled with the idiom. Fix bayonets? You intend to engage in melee combat with Tyranids? That is tactically— For the Emperor! The human battle cry erupted from 37 throats simultaneously. Not the desperate scream of doomed soldiers, but the steady roar of artillery made flesh. The sound carried across the battlefield, and something impossible happened. The Tyranid advance faltered. For just a moment, the perfect biological killing machines, creatures that knew no fear, felt no doubt, hesitated. The hive mind, a gestalt consciousness spanning star systems, paused to analyze this anomaly. Farseer Lirelai's psychic senses reeled. Impossible. The Norn Queen's mind link shows confusion. How do they generate such psychic resonance without psyker abilities? Charge. What followed defied every principle of military science. 37 humans, armed with bayonets and improvised weapons, launched themselves at a swarm of 10,000 Tyranids, not because they believed they would win, but because retreat had never been an option. Private Kowalski impaled his bayonet through a Hormagaunt's brainstem, twisted, then used the corpse as a shield while firing his las pistol into the next wave. When the power pack died, he drew his combat knife and continued fighting. Sergeant Martinez's melter-gun carved molten furrows through the swarm until its fuel cells exhausted. He then wielded it as a club, the superheated barrel cauterizing wounds in any Tyranid that came within reach. The Commissar moved through the melee like an avatar of imperial justice, her power sword leaving sparking rents in chitin armor, her bolt pistol delivering the Emperor's judgment with each thunderous discharge. And Colonel Voss stood at the center of it all, his chainsword screaming as it chewed through alien flesh, his voice carrying over the battlefield chaos. Cadia stands. Mordian endures. The Emperor protects. Captain Kauyan's sensors registered impossible readings. Humans fighting with wounds that should have been instantly fatal. A guardsman with his arm severed at the shoulder, still firing his last pistol left-handed. Another with a tyrannid claw through his chest, using his last breath to arm a grenade. "This is madness," the Tau commander transmitted to his drone network. "They continue fighting past all biological limits." The Felisian pack leader bounded into the melee, his natural agility allowing him to dart between the humans' chaotic charge. He had fought alongside many species, but had never witnessed anything like this. "How do they not feel pain?" he called to Colonel Voss. "We do," Voss replied, decapitating a gaunt with a backhand stroke. "We just don't let it stop us." The hive mind recoiled. Every calculation, every biological imperative suggested that these creatures should have fallen within moments. Instead, they fought with increasing ferocity, each casualty seeming to fuel the survivors' determination. Then the sky opened. Drop pods screamed through the atmosphere like metallic comets, retro thrusters firing at the last possible moment to cushion their impact. Hatches blew outward with explosive force, and from each, pod-emerged figures in midnight blue power armor. "Ultramarines!" Sergeant Martinez shouted, his voice carrying desperate hope. But these were not the Thriend Legion's pristine warriors. These Astartes bore the scars of countless battles, their armor patched and repatched, their weapons worn smooth by constant use. They moved with the fluid precision of demigods, but their voices carried the same grim determination as the Mordian Guard. "Brother Sergeant Titus," the lead space marine announced, his bolter already speaking death into the Tyrannid ranks. "We bring the Emperor's wrath." The tide of battle shifted. Where before 37 humans had stood against impossible odds, now 13 post-human warriors added their inhuman capabilities to the defense. But more than firepower, they brought something else: absolute certainty. "The Codex does not support this action," Brother Sergeant Titus announced calmly, crushing a Tyrannid warrior's skull with his power fist. "But the Emperor's will is clear." Captain Kauyan's tactical analysis subroutines crashed. The combined Imperial force now numbered 50 souls against 10,000 Tyrannids. The mathematical impossibility had only grown larger, yet the humans, all of them, continued fighting as if victory was inevitable. The Hive Tyrant finally entered the battle, its biocannons spitting living ammunition, its massive claws capable of shearing through tank armor. It towered over the battlefield, a perfect synthesis of evolution and destruction, its alien intelligence focused on the elimination of these stubborn prey creatures. Commissar Volga turned to face the monster, reloading her bolt pistol with practiced efficiency. "Always wanted to kill one of the big ones." "Sister," Brother Sergeant Titus called, his own weapons trained on the tyrant. "That is a Hive Tyrant. Its carapace can withstand Lascanon fire." "Then we'll have to hit it harder," she replied. What followed was less a battle than a demonstration of human stubbornness made manifest. The Mordian Guard formed a firing line, their laser guns focusing on the creature's joints and sensory organs. The Space Marines advanced with textbook precision, using cover and suppressing fire to close distance. The Tau captain added his advanced weaponry to the barrage, while the Felisian pack leader used his speed to harass the creature's flanks. But it was Private Kowalski who ended it. The young guardsman, already bearing wounds that should have killed him twice over, noticed something the others missed. The Hive Tyrant's biocannon had overheated from continuous firing, its living ammunition cooking in the barrel. Without hesitation, he sprinted across open ground, dodging scything claws and crushing feet. "Kowalski, no!" Colonel Voss shouted. The private reached the tyrant's massive form, pulled the pins from his remaining frag grenades, and dove directly into the creature's biocannon. Muzzle. The explosion was tremendous. Biomatter and metal fragments painted the battlefield in a gory tapestry. The Hive Tyrant's death scream echoed across the swarm, and suddenly the smaller creatures began retreating. The hive mind had encountered something new, something that defied its understanding of survival instinct, self-preservation, and rational behavior. The connection to its smaller organisms wavered. then snapped entirely as it recoiled from the human's psychic imprint. In the sudden silence, Captain Kaoyon's sensors registered an impossible fact. The battle was over. 50 beings had defeated 10,000, not through superior technology or tactical brilliance, but through sheer inexplicable refusal to accept defeat. How? He asked simply. Brother Sergeant Titus surveyed the battlefield, his helmet's optical sensors recording the carnage for the chapter's historical archives. Faith, he said finally, and the Emperor's protection. Farseer Lirelai materialized beside the group, her usually composed features showing visible strain. In 3 millennia of foresight, I have never witnessed anything like this. Your species operates outside all known parameters of survival behavior. Colonel Voss knelt beside Private Kowalski's scattered remains, collecting the young soldier's dog tags. He was just a kid from the Hab blocks, he said quietly. Never should have been able to do what he did. But he did, Fenrax observed, his lupine features thoughtful. Your pack? Your species? You make the impossible routine. The Tau commander's battlesuit began recording tactical observations for transmission to ethereal high command. The greater good teaches that rational calculation should govern all actions, yet your species achieves victory through irrational faith. Not irrational, Commissar Volga corrected, holstering her bolt pistol. Imperial. There's a difference. As the survivors regrouped, tending to their wounded and preparing for extraction, Captain Koyon found himself observing the humans with new understanding. They weren't insane. They operated on principles his species had never developed. Where the Tau sought efficiency and rational progress, humans embraced sacrifice and absolute determination. Will you teach us? He asked Colonel Voss. The Mordian officer looked up, genuine surprise in his weathered features. Teach you what, Xenos? How to fight. Like that. How to find victory where logic says none exists. Brother Sergeant Titus answered instead. You cannot learn what humanity is, alien. You can only experience it. The evacuation ships descended through the evening sky, their hulls scarred by passage through the system's asteroid fields. As they loaded the survivors, Farseer Lirelai approached the human officers one final time. Your species will either save this galaxy or damn it entirely, she said. Perhaps both. Colonel A. Voss shouldered his pack, Private Kowalski's tag secured in his breast pocket. Emperor willing, we'll save it, but if damnation's what it takes, he shrugged. We'll damned well do our duty. The ships lifted into orbit, carrying their mixed cargo of humans and aliens away from the dead world. In the void between stars, Captain Kaoyon transmitted his report to Tau High Command. Recommendation: immediate alliance with Imperial forces. Reasoning: unknown. Logic: irrelevant. These humans do not win because they should. They win because they refuse to lose. This may be the most dangerous and valuable trait in the galaxy. In the ship's chapel, the surviving Mordians gathered for prayers for the dead. Their voices rose in ancient hymns, carried through the bulkheads to alien ears, who found themselves, despite everything, joining in the unfamiliar words. The Emperor protects, they sang. And for the first time in their respective species' histories, the aliens found themselves believing it might actually be true.
Angels fall.